Okay, good evening everybody. Okay, great, so welcome back. So we have a lot of familiar faces and some new people, right? So thank you for those who are new here for joining us tonight. Just if you don't know me, my name is David Burrell. I'm with Future IQ, which is the consulting company leading the strategic planning process, helping design and facilitate it. I'm going to go through a bit of a recap on what we covered yesterday, and then you all have those packs in front of you, so we're going to work our way through those. I think it's fascinating, right? So we'll look at the data we came up with from yesterday, and we'll start to talk about the future of Traverse City. The format for tonight, we're going to be in this sort of plenary session for about 30 minutes, and then we're going to break out into groups to work on different scenarios for about an hour. Then we're going to come back and present back to each other what we discovered in our scenario build-out. And then, of course, we're going to talk about what we think is our preferred future and what is our least desirable future and so on, and start to lay the groundwork for strategy. So let's just recap very briefly. And by the way, for the people who are new here tonight, I'm holding this microphone because we are recording parts of this, right? And when you come to present, we will have a microphone here, but it's actually not doing anything, right, other than talking to the camera at the back. All right, so Think Tank Part 2. First part, we explored future trends. So we looked at macro trends shaping the future. So we looked at everything from global right down to local. That data, a number of people have asked for copies of that. So we, once we finish tonight, we're going to clean that up. We'll put it on the project portal. And we can probably also send it out to people who came as a PDF. DTE. Excellent, thank you. We also then talked about key drivers shaping the future. That was an exercise we did. And we rated their future impact of those drivers. And then tonight we're going to use that data, which is what I want to share with you, which is in those packs. We're going to develop plausible scenarios of the future and identify these expected and preferred futures and so on. What I also want to add too, so we're going to make this fairly informal. There's no breaks, so feel free to get drinks and food as we go. I do want to thank Chris from DTE, who very generously provided some nice food over there for us, right? So thank you very much, right? We'll appreciate that because it'll keep people going, right? So as our brains get fatigued. All right, so a little bit of the detailed agenda, that's over on the back tables if you need it. But it's basically, as I said, we're going to have about an hour and a bit to work in these breakout groups. Just to recontextualise a little bit, we're involved in what we think is a very important future thinking process, right? So this is one of those rare chances you get as people who are stakeholders in this community to think about your future trajectory and your strategic positioning. And you don't really have a strategic plan. You know, as far as I can tell, you haven't done this deeper work to think about what's your vision, how do all those pieces come together going forward. So it's going to be a very important piece of work over the next 6 to 8 months. We're thinking about two things: trajectory, so direction of change, but also velocity. So yesterday we talked a lot about speed of change. You know, those things that are going to drive us perhaps faster than we want or than we used to, or may steer us in directions we either like or don't like, and how do we deal with that? But we are dealing with these two dimensions of where do we want to go and how fast do we need to move. In the think tank, the challenge was to explore the future, ask the hard questions, think creatively. In terms of, that was the process we went through. Now, to recap, right? So we did the macro drivers, I'm not going to go through all that. The macro trends. We asked people, what were the key drivers shaping the future? And key drivers being events, trends, developments, catalysts that are actively influencing or causing change. So after we did that big scan of trends, we were saying, okay, what of the things do we think, or other things do we think are going to actively shape our future? This was the list we came up with. This is not in your pack, but it's embedded in the graphs, right? And we can send this to you as well. It'll be obviously in the report. But we covered a whole range of stuff, right? I mean, there's abundance of fresh water, the affluent climate migration, so people who are cashed up, who may see this as the escape place from impacts of climate, the accessibility, with the airport and the ability to be able to get to other places or get from other places to here. all the way through. Evolution in public utilities, advent of remote work, trends in tourism. You can see the list there, right? So a really interesting set of things all the way down to proactive urban design.
In your experience, is that kind of a typical what you've seen in other communities?
Well, every community is going to have a unique set of drivers, right? There will be some that are similar, right? So there are drivers that I think are probably, and they're articulated differently here, right? But things like impacts of climate change and those sort of things, most communities are thinking about that one way or another. There are some things, though, that are quite unique, right? Let me pull those out. So the things that struck me that I've not heard other people talk about, so proactive urban design was one. And even the way that was stated was, that's something that you don't see a lot. The regional integration for you is very important. But then there are some that you would expect, like trends in tourism, seasonal residents, given the nature of your community and so on. I thought this one was a really interesting one, the socio-economic ecosystem. But, that's just my take on it, right? So.
I didn't want to slow you down.
Yeah, no problem. Yeah. All right, so what we did was we rated those, right? So we asked you to talk about those in terms of what your view of their relative future impact, each driver. We talked about economic performance, success, built in natural environment, social fabric and cohesion, quality of life and opportunity, right? So we crunched the numbers and we came up with these charts, right? So we plotted two of these dimensions against each other. So social fabric and community cohesion against the quality of life and opportunity. These are sort of people-oriented dimensions. Pretty interesting data, actually. It's not a bad spread, right? So we're sort of really going from about 5 to sort of 8.5. So we're ultimately what we're trying to do here is tease out drivers that are of the highest future impact, right? So out of this list of 20, which are the ones we think are going to be the ones that have the biggest future impact, because that helps us in the next step. They're all important, right? So we're not going to forget any of these, but we just wanted to illuminate or find those ones that you saw were having the biggest potential future impact. The proactive urban design, really interesting outlier. I think that's something that probably for you grabs a lot of issues and sort of pulls them together. But there was a whole cluster here around really interesting social kind of fabric issues is what I'd call it. Things like the socio-economic ecosystem, the trend to year-round employment or economy, regional integration, childcare supply and demand, transportation, healthcare, a really interesting sort of set of, it's the kind of the things that make life function, right? Really interesting set. And then there was the abundance of fresh water, which is really strong on the quality of life and opportunity. So I highlighted those in terms of the colours. I just highlighted those to kind of illuminate them, I guess, from these, right? So there's no particular reason other than these were the ones that were more in that sort of higher level of future impact. And we're going to use those as we go through tonight. And then the second plot was the built-in natural environment against the overall economic performance and success. This plotted out a little differently, right? And so there's a couple of things that are really interesting in this, right? So the proactive urban design, again, is one of the highest rated ones. The regional integration was a really key issue, and the abundance of fresh water came out. But then I also highlighted, just to sort of draw attention to them, the ones that were highest on both of the axes. So the innovation capability here, and then the accelerating climate chaos and the environmental stresses there on the built and natural environment. So if you then put those together, because ultimately we're looking for those themes, I put them under these sort of community evolution and development trajectory. That'll make a bit more sense in a second. And highlighted the ones that were the outliers, these three and those two, and then subsetted the other drivers underneath this. The trends in tourism, I put in italics because it's a kind of an interesting one, right? It sits right here, and you could argue, do you pull it up there as a driver that was high, or does it just sit down here in this cluster? I kind of put it in italics because these other issues came up in the other cluster, and that one was sort of new to this particular plot. So I just put it there just to kind of note it more than anything. All right, any questions on that? Yeah.
Well, I actually have two. One, I'm really surprised not to see anything in there about housing, and I wasn't able to make yesterday.
Yeah.
But that's the issue that comes up
Yeah.
all the time in our community, but yet it didn't show up anywhere.
Yeah, there's a number of things like that that are kind of embedded back in these, in the background to these, right? So we did talk about these a lot, right? And these are kind of like headings. So that whole affordability issue and housing supply and who owns it.
The childcare supply did, number 19.
Yeah, well,
Yeah.
this was, blame them. This is their data, right? Were you saying something about the housing?
Yes, sir. I think we included that a lot in the proactive urban design
Yeah.
and
Well, and
other
I
things,
think
like you
actually
said.
climate migration is part of it.
That's right. So the pressure on the housing issue, was the affluent climate migration, pushing people out, and then I think that's why the proactive urban design came up so high, because it is a little bit of a grab bag for a lot of those key issues, right? And the seasonal residents, right? So.
I was more not there.
Yeah.
I'm not going to rehash yesterday, redo it. But.
No, it's really good. I'm actually glad you raised that, because we do want to make sure that people who weren't here understand what this is about. And essentially these drivers, we're going to build out the work you did, and it'll become like a situational analysis, right? That here's these key sets of drivers, and here's how they, in your observation, here's how they may shape the future. All right, so the point of this exercise, right? So we're trying to find these two kind of themes, right? Because that helps us build what we call our scenario matrix. So we're in a scenario planning process, and tonight we're going to speculate and build out 4 different plausible versions of the future. Because the premise here is that we're standing here in 2024, we're looking at the 2035, so 10 years into the future. And if you think about Traverse City and you think about all the future splitting questions that you worked on yesterday, there's clearly no single future in front of you. But there's at least a range of plausible futures. And so what this exercise is going to do is trying to map out these different plausible futures. And I always think of them as like they're railway tracks into the future. What if we go down that railway track? What does Traverse City look like in 10 years' time, right? What if we go down that railway track? What does that look like? What are the implications? What are the consequences? And so on, right? So these 4 different scenarios we're going to build out. We use this framework to be able to lay the foundation of that. So we had those 2 big themes that were the kind of headlines for the group of drivers that you rated highest on what we call, say, in this case, community evolution, so how your community may evolve over time. We've got some endpoint descriptions, which I'll talk about. And then the other one is around the development trajectory, which picks up a lot of these issues around the economy, the built environment, and so on. And these essentially create these different scenario spaces. So, the community evolution axis, right? So these are presented with arrows on the end, so they're intended to be what ifs. What if we go that way? What happens, right? Or what if we go that way? What happens? They're not good or bad, right or wrong. They're just different possible directions we could go, and then a chance to explore the implications. So on this end we said, well, what if we maintain the path, community evolution? The city focuses on local internal issues. The community fabric is allowed to naturally change and evolve as the population demographics and ownership patterns shift, and as the tourism and visitation economy grows. Not good or bad, but what happens if that was to be the trajectory, right?
But that's kind of, wouldn't you call that trajectory reacting to the environment?
I tend to try and avoid words like react or reactive or proactive, because they can be deemed a little judgmental, right?
Yeah.
I'm really trying to present just different versions, right? Sort of strip the emotion out a little bit so we can kind of think about, okay, let's just let our minds go down there, because and I should say this, I'm going to say this a couple of times. I know I'm in a room full of people who solve problems, right? Okay, and I'm going to ask you to suspend that for the next hour and a bit, right? Because it's going to be really hard to tease out futures if you're always trying to fix it because you're going to, oh, I like this, let's go faster, or oh, I don't like this, we're not going there, right? I need you to play out these versions of the future, right? And talking to people, maintain the path, that could be quite attractive for a lot of people. Okay?
Okay.
We're not going to interfere, we're going to let things go, we're going to focus on, the council, the commissioners need to focus on the local internal issues. Let's just do that, right? Let's take care of ourselves. The other end of this continuum, something quite different, right? So we picked up this driver about the regional integration, which was one of the highest score drivers in both those plots. So we're saying the community intentionally invests in designing and building the social, economic systems and amenities to create a complete community. So that was the subtext of a lot of your drivers in that theme, right? A strong regional leadership approach helps amplify the city influence and heft. So yesterday we talked about, this issue of the region, and I asked you, should the city lead or not, right? And people, well, we have to think about that, right, obviously. So at this end, we're going to be focusing on ourselves. This end, we're going to focus on that regional approach, taking care of our own community, designing, kind of very intentionally designing and investing, but also building this leadership so we sort of develop that heft to be able to exert more influence. All right, that's that axis, right? Not good or bad, not right or wrong, just different possible directions. What's the implication? Development trajectory, same kind of construct at the bottom here. We actually had some discussion yesterday about do we just let market forces play out or do we intentionally do something, right? So now we get a chance to play that out. So this one here, market flow, I called it. Development patterns and housing availability is primarily driven by emerging market needs and forces, so market-driven. City planning and infrastructure investment responds to the needs as needs arise, including making adaptations and upgrades as climate impacts occur. So we are somewhat responding in this one, right? We're more proactive in this one, somewhat responding, but I call it market flow because we're really just following where the market and where those trends take us. This one here, proactive design. So again, picking up some of that language in that driver that was the outlier in both plots. So proactive urban design shapes the future. There is investment in expanding business diversity and innovation capability to build a year-round economy. The focus is on regional collaboration and integration that helps manage resources, utilities and climate adaptation, right? So very different posture, same basic set of topics, right? Any questions on that?
I would say the whole idea of building malls back in the 80s would be a great example of, at the time, they thought that was proactive design. But that by taking that path, now all the dynamics with climate change, all sorts of things have happened that now they're less desirable, and communities are now having to deal with the results of that decision that's just an example, right?
Sure.
Now I kind of get what you're saying.
Yeah. So we're gonna use this to play out, okay, where do we end up in 5 and 10 years' time if we follow these different trajectories? So we want to do a little bit of that forecasting, right, to see where we go, right? So each scenario space, so scenario A is a future that's a combination of this and this, right? So it's saying, okay, in scenario A, at the community level, we're kind of focusing on ourselves, we're maintaining the path, we're really focused on these internal issues, where the fabric's naturally changing and evolving, but we're really working on proactive design and so on. My question is then, how does your community change over time? What are the kind of evolutions or the implications of that, right? Okay, so, and we're going to randomly allocate you to 4 different scenarios, so you're going to get a chance to build this out. And that diagram's in your pack as well. How we're going to do this, bit of a structure to this. We're looking at 2035. We're going to ask you to think about predicted characteristics for the scenario you're working on, for the economy and the industry, the community and the social fabric, the built environment and the landscape. Examples of some of the characteristics, and this is just suggested topics, right? We just want you to dive into this and develop out a really robust narrative, right? But under this economy and industry characteristics, we want you to think about what's your economy look like? What are the business types that you have? Where are they located? What's the density of them, the type of jobs, employment level, seasonal profiles, skills level, wage and profiles, commute patterns, we looked at those yesterday, cost of living, regional, local connectivity and so on. Community and social fabric, think about what your population might be, what the growth rates look like, age profiles, where are people coming from, what's the underlying sort of ethos of the community, your levels of integration, the type of sort of city services, The built environment and landscape, then it's all those things. You know, your city and neighbourhood character, transportation systems, types of housing. I was talking to somebody earlier about tear downs and rebuilds, right? You know, we're going to see more of those, or what's going on, right? Adaptation to climate change, what are we doing, so on, right? So you get to map out a really rich storyline about the future. We're also going to ask you to work on headline news, so those characteristics are sort of the endpoint in 2035. This gives us a way to think about what's our journey to that, right? So what's your local rag called? Do you have a local newspaper? Well, there's two, are there?
Ticker and Record Eagle.
Okay, right. So be the editor writing for this, right? What's the headline in 2025, 2030, 2035, under those different dimensions, right? Obviously, they're going to be a little sensational, right? But headlines kind of also tell us a bit about what's our journey look like, you know? You know, does a school close or open, or, you know, do we hit some benchmark? Do we win some award? Do we lose the last house in a neighbourhood, or whatever, right? That's a chance for a little bit of fun, right? Here's some pitfalls, right? And I started to talk to this, right? So we're going to allocate you to a scenario. Your job is to work on that scenario, right? So you have to kind of mentally block out the other ones, right? Some of you may find yourself in a scenario you love, some may find yourself in a scenario you don't like, right? You're going to try and fix it. I'm just going to ask you to leave that at the door for an hour, okay? We want you to predict this, play this out. Use that objective forecasting part of your mind. Don't get emotionally hooked. It's not real yet, okay? We are just speculating, right? Although it's really hard, isn't it? Because we do get so emotionally hooked even in a game. Right? So, you know, you'll have an emotional reaction, just don't get hooked by it, right? We're exploring possible futures. We're not deciding on preference yet. We will tonight. I'm going to ask you to scan and predict widely, so don't get too micro-focused. I want you to paint the brushstrokes of what this future looks like. So if somebody who wasn't here can pick it up and read it, and they can kind of feel themselves, immerse themselves in that possible future. And you guys will be good at this, right? Make it a group discussion. I mean, everyone has a perspective to contribute, so, you know, be a team on this one. We're going to just ask you to sort of self-organise. We need a facilitator for each group, so somebody who just wants to volunteer to be the kind of, you know, the shepherd, right, to keep things on track. A timekeeper, so in your packs there's a timeline, a recorder or two who will take the notes for the group, will provide you the handouts, and then a presenter or two, and that may be the same as some of these people, to come and present back. So you're going to have like sort of 3 to 5 minutes to present back your scenario. So we want that kind of storyline coming out. The timeline, so we're going to give you about 75 minutes on this one. I think it's good, and we've got 4 breakout tables. So we've got one here on this side of the room, one at the back, and 2 at the room directly across the corridor. You're small enough to be able to sit around the table. I would just come together first of all and go, okay, what the hell are we dealing with here, right? Which scenario are we in? And let's just kind of noodle on this a bit. Let's kick it around, right? So you want to keep referencing yourself in those endpoints of the axes, right? Say, okay, we're in this future that's got this set of conditions and this set of conditions. There's 2 sets of conditions that shape your scenario. And you may not want to break into 3 subgroups, right? You might just actually be small enough to work on the characteristics together, share the insights on that, come back, develop the headline news, and then we need a short scenario name. So the scenario name is, like, in a couple of words, something that captures what that future's about. Not overly emotional, not sort of utopian or dystopian, but something that just captures, you know, somebody could read it, pick it up and go, oh, there's that version of the future in that one, right? It might be Traverse City X, or it might just be a name of a movie, or whatever you come up with, right? And then be back ready to present. All right, any questions on the task at hand? Yes?
General question. Could you go back to one of your grid slides where you have the...
Which one?
All the colored things?
Oh yeah, the coloured things, yeah.
I'm very familiar with that. That's a Boston Consulting Group grid.
Well...
My question is, somewhere in this...
Have we changed names?
Somewhere in this planning process... Yes. Are we going out to your members, your clients, your constituents, your residents to say, what is important to you? And then the other part of the grid is, how are we doing on what's important to you?
Yes.
And what you end up with is up in the right-hand corner is the high leverage issues that are important and we're doing a great job.
Yes.
You get down at the upper left and you're doing a great job on things that people don't care about.
Yeah, okay. I understand what you're saying. Let me just...
I'm just asking the question.
Yeah, let me just fill in the blanks very briefly on that, right? Because I do want us to get it to the task at hand, right? So the think tank we're in now, yesterday and today, is one of the steps in this process, right? So we have about a 6 or 8 month engagement process. We're going to have surveys, we're going to have community visioning sessions, we're going to have focus groups, we're going to have reports on situational analysis and so on, right? This is a chance, because what I've found makes community dialogue the most effective is giving something people to react to. And so you're the group that is doing the deeper thinking to develop these plausible scenarios of the future that we can then take out to the community and say, what's your reaction to these? What do you like about this one or not? And so on, right? We find that just gets you much further down the strategic track than just saying, what do you like or not like? Because you know how that goes, right? You know, we're really wanting people to make informed choices about plausible futures, right? And you're the brains trust essentially developing out that first cut of what they are, okay? And I think it'll make more sense when we get to the end of tonight, right, on that. Yes?
You explained things very clearly.
Okay.
And I appreciate
Okay.
that. I just want to re-articulate what I think I heard,
Uh-huh.
which might actually maybe dovetail into the question. The opportunity for other individuals within the community, the broader group, to share their desires will still occur.
Oh, yeah.
That's what you're saying.
Yeah. We got like 6 months of this, right? I talked to the council, the commissioners the other night about this. I mean, we are deliberately designing this at the behest of your staff and commissioners to make this as open and participatory as we can, right? So we intend to have thousands of people participate through surveys, touch points, you know, all that kind of good stuff, right? But we've got to take each piece and build on it, right? So that's part of the pathway, is that this becomes a foundational piece of those future conversations, right? And then that'll give us like a sense of where people want to go. Then we have to figure out, if that's where people want us to go, how do we get there, right? And that's the second part of the project.
David,
Okay, yes.
I noted just yesterday, took a look, the Traverse City website has the full methodology for what we're doing here, and it does start, you know, like, we're at the top. And all
Yeah.
the things we're talking about are further down the line. So you can look at that and get a really good feeling for what's going to happen.
Yeah, and yesterday was literally our first kick at it, right? So I did some interviews earlier and, you know, a couple of months ago, right? All right, so the game's on, right? I mean, there's a high expectation here tonight, right? We need your A game to the table, right? In terms of really developing out this version of the future that you're going to work on, right? So your best analytical, predictive brain, I want you to really wrestle with the conditions you're set in your scenario and forecast what you think will happen. And like the good, the bad, you know, the implications, consequences, every scenario is going to have something that will be appealing to somebody and something that probably won't be appealing to somebody else, right? So we want to kind of map out the fullest picture that we can of these scenarios, right? So how are we going to do this? So scenario group A is going to be at that table over there. B is going to be at the table at the back. And then C and D will be in the room next door. You guys in this little patch here are scenario group A, right? So you're going to go over there.
This is sitting thing, I guess.
Your scenario group B, right? This is C, so you're going next door. And your D, smaller group, but maybe very potent, next door, right? You may find some of these scenarios do have tensions in them, right? There might be a sense of we're pushing on one thing and we're, you know, tapping the brake on the other, but you'll play that out, all right? So we'll give you an hour, have at it, right, to your groups. So A's here, B's there, C and D are next door. Take your packs, we'll bring the sheets, find your facilitator. All right, good. So here's how we're going to do it, right? We're going to go through each of the scenarios and get a report out. We're going to start with A. I put the names of the scenarios up here. Some of these might lack a little twinge of imagination. We'll see though, right? But let's just call these working names for us, right? So, because I think they are a way to sort of capture what the future's about. We're going to ask you to come up and present and use the microphone because we're going to be recording this. And we'll start with A and just go around, okay? So who's presenting for your group, please? Is there two of you? Debbie, you coming up?
Are we also doing the headlines?
Yes, please. So here's what we want, right? So, I mean, you guys are all very capable, right? We don't need you to read through every bullet point, right? So use this as a chance to kind of use the bullet points, right? But tell us the narrative. Tell us really how you saw this future unfolding, right? We want that really kind of tactile, visceral experience. And then the headline news, you can pick out just, maybe pick out 3 or 4, right? We don't need all. Now, we're going to obviously collect those sheets. We're going to put those in the report. So this is scenario A. This is a really interesting one, right? There's some obvious tension in this, right? So we're coupling together, maintain the path on the community evolution. So we're sort of somewhat sort of inwardly focused. We're letting things kind of evolve. So the community's going to change. But we have this other kind of tension in here with this proactive design on the urban landscape and this investment in business diversity and innovation, focusing on a year-round economy and this kind of regional collaboration and integration on some things like resources, utilities, climate adaptation. But you've got this kind of a little bit of a tension in this too. So really interested to hear how that played out in your forecasts.
All right, yeah, we did have a little tension there. We were trying to maintain the course, but then also influence the design so we could have a really healthy and active community. So we felt a lot better once we named our scenario name. We called Traverse City First. We were looking after the betterment of our community first above everything else. So what we saw as economy and industry characteristics that we would become rather diverse, high-tech type of community with a health corridor, 4-year university, a lot of focus on active, healthy living with outdoor recreation industry, a lot of entertainment with venues and events, public squares that are active, and food entrepreneurs and local food, healthy eating, fresh food, that kind of stuff. Community social fabric, we realize that we're going to be, since we're so attractive, we're going to be attracting a lot of wealthy senior citizens, which itself creates its own issues, but we want to focus on healthy living, transportation options, world-class art, music, cultural assets, venues and public squares, again, like I mentioned, partnerships with private housing to help us build workforce housing. So we need the private sector to help us out in that regard. So resource and housing collaboration on a regional basis because we can't do it on our own. We're looking at our best interests, but we know that we need our partners in the area to help us out. Farmers market, active. This was influenced a little bit by the movie last night. Active community organizations and clubs for a really healthy type of community. The built environment will have housing options. So duplexes and fourplexes look like single-family homes with some good design standards to strengthen community character. Office spaces that are empty today would be converted into some housing opportunities, mixed-use neighborhoods for a denser, more walkable type of environments, community gardens, and once again, active community spaces, parks, and civic squares throughout the community.
And our headlines.
Very good.
So a couple of the headlines are, I'm going to jump to kind of the end goal, where we want to be in 2035. So the first one has to do with economy and industry. It says, Innovation Education Center on Human Health Wellness opens. And then under community and social fabric, first in Midwest, Traverse City Blue Zone. Does everybody know what a blue zone is? Okay. And then in 2025 for build environment and landscape, city announces communities design standards and plans. And then for 2035, Traverse City region, best place to live for everyone again.
All right, great. So just before you go, so any questions to this group, questions of clarification or how they derive some of those predictions?
Pardon?
The blue.
Blue zone?
Yeah.
I'm gonna
Blue Zone is where people live the longest because they have a really good mental attitude about life, and they're eating well, and they're sleeping well, and they're socializing. They're not isolated. They're doing things interactive, and that makes you live longer. We don't live on cul-de-sacs with fractional, but
It was Ontario, so let me go 105.
Okay.
I paid at least $7.
Yeah, and it's a really good example actually of proactive urban design in blue zones influencing people's quality of life, right? And that's what I heard these guys play out really well, right? I really heard this dimension actually really influencing this dimension, right? That kind of forecast. So it'll be interesting when we get to these other scenarios when we have either different dimensions on the development trajectory or different approaches on the community evolution, all right? So nice job. Now, is that a plausible future? And what I mean by that, not whether you like it or not, but is that a future you could see happen? Like, are we in the realms of reality with that?
I think so.
Yeah.
All right, good. So we have one tent peg in, right? So we're sort of mapping out this future canvas, 4 big scenarios. We have one tent peg in, right? Let's go to scenario group B. So coupling together proactive design with the regional approach. Tim, what did you discover? What did you predict?
So ours was like the last one, just better. Because it's regional, so it's that, but it's regional, and it's not quite as exclusive. So year-round economy, so all the things that have been touched on. We have the blue economy, the green economy, all the economies, but a focus on small and medium businesses, realization that we don't need to attract that giant corporation that's then going to leave in some amount of time. Professional services, attracting employees because of the quality of life, and attracting businesses because of the quality of life. For community and social fabric, again, a lot of the things that were said, but a big thing was a 4-year university because we are growing as a region. We can certainly host a 4-year university. NMC becomes that. And then both at the university level as well as before university, a lot more community integration with education. So enhanced school outcomes, or co-ops, experiential learning, networks, stronger trade education, apprenticeships, et cetera, lots of things there. And then what else did we have in the community and social fabric? Oh, opportunities. So we also touched on the movie from last night as far as Bowling Alone, and how to build spaces in our community that help to facilitate that kind of natural interaction for people, whether it be outdoor symphony, all sorts of things. And then finally, built environment and landscape. The key there was housing is not a barrier to anyone to live, work, or play in the region. High service level of public transit, including all sorts of things we can't dream of because we're looking at 2035. Multimodal transportation focus, and then preserving the character for commercial architecture. We didn't have a chance to flesh it out completely, but touched on what is it that most people love about downtown, and can that be replicated? Maybe not perfectly, but we are going to be growing. So as things expand down Woodmere, Garfield, et cetera, do we want to see big boxes that are just different colors, or is there some way to influence that and be proactive with it? And then finally, maintaining, enhancing natural spaces, more trees. Headlines, can I go to headlines?
Yeah, please.
I'll just do the 2035s. We have for economy and industry, TC region is first in nation for zero carbon transportation infrastructure. Community and social fabric, first graduating class for TC's 4-year university. And for built environment, landscape, housing, no longer a barrier to anyone living, working, or playing in TC region. So kind of utopian, but.
All right.
Okay, don't go away. So, any questions to Tim? Any questions of clarification? Probing this at all? I am, if you could speak to, right, because a lot of great stuff, and again, you can hear the proactive design shaping the scenario. Just so make sure we've got it in our minds. How did that approach here on the regional approach? And I got it in the headline news, right? So this notion of, you'd have enough heft for a university and so on. Did you explore this component about the leadership and how that creates a different future to this, right? Because a fair bit of what you're talking about is the proactive design. I really want to make sure that we've got the kind of different dimensions on that community evolution.
We didn't resolve it because we're not here to solve the problems. We're just, but we did talk about and it was a possible headline, and it probably was in here, and I skipped over it, but the first regional, what was it called? First regional council, like regional council formed, like that was in the next couple of years, regional council formed to help guide the
Development.
development. Thank you.
Because I'm kind of like, just this is my view, right? So I notice I always tell you when it's my view rather than a data point, right? It's my view, right? I was looking at this, and to me, I was wondering about to what degree the regional approach turbocharges some of the elements of here, right? You know, to me, this is really strong, right? This seems to have like a natural limitation because you're kind of you're limiting the scope. Here it seems to be like you turbocharge it potentially because you're expanding the scope, right?
Yeah.
And I got that in the headlights, right?
Well, and then we did touch on that as well in our discussion there, that everything we listed on here was for the region. It wasn't just for Traverse City proper. So everything I kind of read through was for the region. And we
That clarifies something for me. I know about for you.
Yeah.
Okay, good. Anything else to Tim? Okay, good. Thank you. Nice job. And we're going to get photos of the scenario groups too, aren't we, at some point, right? Up here. We'll probably do one group at a time, right? Now, is that a plausible scenario? Is that one you could see happening?
Yes.
Okay. Not perhaps as kind of strong on that, more like maybe, right? What's the hesitation on that? Because I want to make sure we're in the realm of plausibility, not fantasy, right? So we want to be presenting real choices to people.
The regional integration is a challenge because I think there are current and recognizable barriers between Traverse City and the regional players.
Right.
And it takes strong political and social will to break down those barriers. And those are hard. That's hard work.
Right, and we have a decade, right?
Yeah.
So that's part of why we look a little further out, right?
Yeah.
And I understand that. You know, we saw that very thing in Park City, like a desire to reach out to solve big challenges, regional transportation. But you've got a lot of fiefdoms to deal with, right?
Yeah.
And different acts. So it takes a while, particularly, I don't know what your history so much is, but it takes a while to build trusted relationships and for people to kind of build a sort of, collaboration.
Well, so to that point, it's been a sticking point to me to see. It helps amplify the city influence it has, as opposed to amplify good results or amplify positive change, or because it almost seems like it's about winning influence for the city of Traverse City in the context of regional solutions, which may or may not be true.
Well, a really good point. That actually comes directly from something we talked about yesterday, right?
Well, that's what I get for not trying.
Yeah. No, but a really good point, because I might have overreached on this, right? Because I was trying to channel the narrative, right? And we were talking about that. I think the context of the conversation was the city can only go so far, right? And there was a concern. I forget who mentioned it. I don't think the guy's here, but about the danger of you losing influence because as the region grows around you, there's the danger that the power base shifts away from what's the traditional core of the region. So that's why we kind of called that out a little bit, right?
Yeah.
Okay.
And the meeting the regional area just about.
Exactly. Yeah, and we had a quick conversation about is it the role of the Traverse City to lead that conversation, to convene people, or are you just part of it? The answer we heard was there was appetite at least yesterday to we probably need to have a responsibility to convene people and lead it.
Well, isn't Michigan a little different too, in that the power tends to be at a lower level, meaning townships have, more sway that you get up to a state level.
Okay.
So we are a city surrounded by a lot of townships.
Well, you're a city of what, 15,000 in a region of approaching 100,000.
Right.
And that's the sort of calculus we were working on. Anybody else? Yes, please.
Yeah, just to tie the emphasis to the issue, the concerns about the dynamics.
Yeah.
That's the reason why for our group, we highlighted one of the headlines at the 2025 was at the first region of Vermont. So the idea was being able to, and it was specifically targeted at dealing with relationship issues.
Yeah, so if you form that next year, by the time we get 10 years out, we might have accomplished some of those things, right? Okay, good. All right, a nice little kind of reality check there, right? Scenario group C, right? Let's go there. So this was regional approach coupled with market flow. Possibly going to be quite a different narrative, right? So this will be a really interesting one, right? And you call yours balancing act. So we've got the working titles up there, right?
Right. So balancing act, yes. So ours focused a lot on a very prescriptive approach. Very much the region was going to drive things. It was all about the region, and we all spent a lot of time checking ourselves of, we keep talking about Traverse City. We got to remember to back this up and talk about the region. So again, as we talked about kind of the predicted characteristics for the economy, we talked about everything revolving around, all of our conversation revolved around a regional group, a regional committee, a regional council that's set up, and planning and zoning really is driven out of that group, so that there's a consistency kind of across the whole region for how we deal with all aspects of transportation, housing, businesses. We talked about under characteristics of economy and industry, micro downtowns, creating those corridors, if you will, like we talked about. We talked about Woodmere here in town, 8th Street, doing that even further out throughout the different regions and looking at some of those other communities in the region, the Suttons Bays, the Elk Rapids, the Kingsleys, the Kalkaskas, and how they, what the region can do to help supercharge those areas as well. That 15-minute walk concept, can you create those mini downtowns, those corridors, to give everything a resident needs in that area? Mixed use, retail, commercial, restaurants, professional, all of that being part of, but not forgetting those spaces in between to support agriculture and agritourism, our freshwater, technical innovation. Traverse City is the commercial hub for the region. It is the professional hub for the region. And so remembering that, leveraging that throughout the whole region. As we talked about some of the characteristics of community and social fabric, youthful population, turn the population around, get that barbell shape of demographic resized. Working on our natural resource assets, leveraging those, integrated trails, farmers markets, wineries, the agritourism, making sure though that the senior population we have throughout the region, that we've got the right services for them, that we focused on what needs to be done to make sure they can live, because we're still going to be attracting those folks here. Transportation diversity, again, making sure we've got all ways of transportation access throughout the region and making sure that we invest in that. Kind of getting that same theme through built environment and landscape. Again, looking at those spaces in between our corridors, our micro downtowns, protected but connected. Housing types for all types of living situations, really looking at, again, not only that mixed use, but that quads and duplexes, townhomes, single-family homes, multifamily homes, renters. We have to make sure that diversity of housing is available for everybody. Managing our stormwater. The natural resource of the water is so important, making sure that we've taken care of that. And we talked about some of the assets that we have in the region, things like Fish Pass, things like we talked about the new Conservancy property off of 3 Mile and how connected that is with all the schools and promoting things like that. So that was, did I miss any?
No, I think you captured most of that.
Yeah, a lot of it was really focused on this idea, aspirational, of a very strong regional structure where things would be consistent kind of across. We talked about the dangers of having sprawl and design differences or blocking people out. The one community promoting ADUs, another community saying no, one community saying you can only have 1 acre lot minimums, another community allowing higher density. That doesn't, there's got to be some consistency. to let the market flow.
Then I think we were trying to strike the balance
Yeah.
between the market flow and the regional approach with moving past what I would consider not generic, but the gray master plan vision statements that don't have any real teeth. But to move past just talking about the conceptual stage for these high level ideas and codifying them in zoning ordinance, not just in Traverse City, but in all the different townships. Like, let's get together and get these so that they're meaningful. The master plans are all great and the vision statements are beautiful, but developers, architects, anyone who's thinking about doing real projects will go right to the zoning ordinance, see what's allowed, see what's not allowed, boom. That's it. That's the way, so if we can get all of these different entities to be coordinated with the end result being some systemic vision that is in the code, then we can do something, then it's
The
real.
market will follow that.
Yeah.
Okay.
Let's spit it out.
No, so just before we go to the headlines, right? So there's something really interesting here. So I want to just explore how you see the differentiation between scenario B and scenario C, right? So really, I got a whole different iteration here. We're leaning on the regional approach, but this is much more like almost a command and control, right? We're going to put in, and so there's a different kind of quality of outcome, right? Do you anyone want to probe that a little bit? Yeah.
Well, we didn't spend as much time on the market flow, but one thing we talked about was kind of balancing the prescriptive issues through zoning.
Yeah.
But then incentives.
Yeah.
To incentivize what the market is going to do anyway.
Yeah.
So it's not just, oh, here's what I can do by right, and you can't tell me how I can do it. I'm just going to do it.
Yeah. And you kind of put some guardrails on that, right?
Right.
But it does sound like the difference to me is there's a little bit more magic in that proactive design one, right? I mean, I kind of got I was trying to visualize as you were talking about it, I kind of got, okay, we're going to have, housing, but it's probably going to all look a lot the same, right? Or something like that, because it's going to be codified, or, you accomplish some things, but so did you explore that at all? Or? Yeah.
Well, that's why the regional approach needs to be proactive in the design.
We'll get to that. See so I'm interested in how you played that out differently to the other one, because it shares that regional approach. Very different on the development trajectory, right?
Yeah, so I think that the market flow, I didn't hear a lot of the market flow. Basically, market flow is the market determined, right? But they said, I want to put the guardrails in.
Yeah.
We're not against capitalism, but regulation is.
Here's your lane.
Are the guardrails to smart development?
So stuff still may not go where you want it to go, right? Because the market that's not going to.
That's the
Well,
balancing act.
Yeah.
So we talked about Morgan Farms, the Morgan Farms project, and okay, there's mixed use in this, and retail and commercial.
Mixed use, they're going to have this, businesses and working places and coffee shops. The market wasn't there. That doesn't mean that the market isn't there next year or
5 years or 10 years.
Right. And how do you recognize that and as the regional entity and determine, okay, what are the things we need to do to modify what we've got here to make sure we do attract in? Are there incentives that we need to do? Are there other things we need to be doing?
There seems to be a temporal variable too that kicks in with the market flow because you can't anticipate. You have to respond. It's reactive. And therefore, it's so much different than it is now. We know we need that housing. We need that housing for a while. We know we need a better transportation system. We need it for a while. So it's quite restrictive rather than allowing you to be even a little proactive.
I think that's a really nice way to. I think that's the core of this. To me, there's a bit of a frustration, right? We're putting up our guardrails, we're saying, but we're kind of still waiting for somebody to come and make the investment, right? And it may or may not happen.
Here's one of our headlines.
Okay, go. Sorry, I might have jumped in. So go.
Short-term rental taxes fund affordable housing boom.
Good.
That's it.
Nothing else?
We jumped on the university one as well.
NMC becomes State University, campus hub in former Haggerty buildings.
Very good.
All right, that's a good one.
That is a good one.
I know. TCAP's enrollment surges. Neighboring districts also see growth.
Yeah.
That was our community and social fabric. Electric boat manufacturer drops anchor in Cadillac. What's your economy and business in industry?
Did we get? Yeah, we got each other.
5 counties form regional zoning board. 5 county connects with light rail system. Tart Trail reaches Charlevoix.
Oh, very nice. Good.
Yeah.
How about the carriage?
Carriage Flats adds business district.
Yeah.
Do you guys know where Carriage Flats
No.
is? It's by the new beta station on
Oh, yeah.
the Frenier.
Up on La Frenier, yeah.
Yeah.
Okay.
Like I said, we did spend a lot of time talking about trying to get out of the Traverse City mindset and think, okay, we've got Interlochen, we've got Glen Arbor, we've got the Sleeping Bear Dunes, we've got all these regional assets, and how do we invest in them and leverage them for the betterment of the whole region?
Why not? Thanks.
Great job. Wow. Good job. That is a balancing act.
So scenario group D, interesting, this will be on maintain the pass with market flow. How do we see this playing out?
Breakaway.
Thank you. Before I get started, I'd like Group D to raise their hand. Members, there they are. Yeah. All right. Yeah. Thank you. We also called it TC anchors and adapts. Anchors like digs in and adapts. But it could also be called the Ghost of TC Future. And maybe Group D for Debbie Downer. We're not sure. But if you look at where we were supposed to work, the city focuses on local and internal issues, and the community fabric is allowed to naturally change. So it's kind of like who's got the reins, and it's just doing what it's going to do. The same down here with market flow. Development patterns and housing availability is primarily driven by emergency market needs and forces. City infrastructure investment response, we're reacting. We're not planning ahead. So that's kind of where we are right now. I'm going to give some of the meat and potatoes and all the high impact headlines that are coming from Liz. So,
these are great.
Economy and industry predicted characteristics in 2035. Property downtown will become increasingly expensive. We'll see more neighborhood corridors for businesses and decentralized. Businesses will decentralize. Business types will likely stay the same. More service industry jobs, white collar, remote work growing, income inequality, cost of living increases, harder to get services and blue collar type jobs, trades, contractors, that kind of thing. Students enroll in trades over traditional college paths as a reaction, and average wages increase but do not keep up with the local cost of living. Community social fabric. Fewer full-time residents equals fewer families. Regional cooperation continues to deteriorate. City versus county perpetuates / fractured relationships, inconsistent land use. Grassroots and engaged community continues. Arts and culture remains a priority. More neighborhood groups. Homelessness becomes more challenging to solve. TC is a great place to party, but can't afford to live there. The built environment and landscape, City Commission supports diverse housing options and density. The city invests in infrastructure to meet the needs of the tourist-driven economy, and demand on infrastructure comes from outside the city. That increases. Outside of Traverse City, neighboring communities continue to build subdivisions. Utilities continue to promote greener options. Traffic continues to worsen. City prioritizes busing and public transit within its city limits, but that fosters a car culture into Traverse City from the outside.
Yeah.
So.
Great job there, Chief.
This is not my job, really. I'm really a happy guy.
I think this is called Other Duties as Assigned.
Yes, ma'am.
I think I'm going to read them all real quick because it shows like this progression. Under economy and industry next year, Cherry Festival celebrates 100 years. What does the future hold? 2030, Traverse City makes another top 10 lists. Trouble in Paradise. 2035, retirees and tourism flourishing, local neighborhoods grappling. Community and social fabric. 2025, community rallies for the new strategic plan supporting missing middle housing and workforce opportunities. 2030, friction among regional leaders grows in face of housing homelessness crisis. 2035, this one. TCAPS consolidates high schools due to declining enrollment. Built environments, 2025, city adopts policy for fully electric fleet by 2035. 2030, TC repurposes unused office space for workforce housing units. 2035, did I say 2035? 2030. 2035, Elmer's awarded contract for new bypass. Lawsuits filed. We're sorry, everyone.
So questions of clarification.
Sit up.
And probably the important question, is that a plausible future?
Yeah.
Whether you like it or not, but is that one that could happen?
Yeah.
So, and we actually didn't ask on C, right? But assuming people saw that as plausible, right? We have 4 distinctly different versions of the future with really different implications, right? And I think you did a really nice job playing those out, right? And, you know, every one of these scenarios, somebody's going to find a home for themselves in it, right? There's going to be a winner, and there's going to be kind of consequences and so on, right? So a really nice job playing that out, all right? Good.
It wasn't just me though, I was just a pretty face, but we did talk a lot about the regional aspect and the importance of, so I don't know, if you ask them nice, you reach out, just grab them by the collar and bring them in, but they gotta be involved. So we had, where's he, Woody, where are you?
Mike here.
Well, you kept us on task. He's awesome.
Yeah, all right, good job. Okay, nice job everybody, right? So, and obviously we need to make sure we get those notes, right? So we'll write that up. So this is great, right? It gives us kind of this big picture view of the future. But what becomes really important is, what do you think about those, right? And we know life is a little bit more complex than just 4 big storylines, right? So we want to go a little bit more nuanced here, and we want to think about the future and your reaction to those in a very specific way. So for this I need a volunteer or two, right? Who'd like to be my volunteer? Okay, maybe you, the first one who spoke, so we'll pick you, right? Come on, a volunteer. Who wants to volunteer?
It's not hard. Let's spell.
Well, now everybody's there. There you go. Okay, yeah, come up here. Good job, right?
Okay.
All right, so Lauren, all right, you're a resident, aren't you?
I am a resident.
Okay, great. So we know life is a little bit more complex, as I said, than these 4 big scenarios, right? But if you look at this diagram, we've got these axes, and these are continuums, right? And you can see in the background we've got this 10 by 10 grid ghosted into the background. So if you think about these as continuums, that gives us literally 100 different versions of the future to think about. Mm-hmm. So we can get very nuanced in terms of a number of questions I want to pose, right? So I'm going to take that and push the scenarios to the background and pull that grid to the foreground, right? And we're going to use this as a framework to think about 3 things, right? So we're going to think about the least desirable future. So where in that 100 different, I'm going to ask, and you're going to do this in your own mind, right? So we're going to all give you a sheet to do this on. What's the least desirable future, as in what will produce the least optimal or least desired future in 2035 for Traverse City, right? So remember, we're now bringing that kind of planning context into Traverse City. What's the expected future? Where do you think we're going to end up if we just keep doing what we're doing? So what's our current trajectory got us heading towards? And then where's the preferred future that you think is the optimal and creates the best outcome for Traverse City? Now, because these are continuums, you get a lot of choice here in terms of how much emphasis you put on certain things. So obviously the corners are the more extreme versions, or the edges are the more amplified versions of those topics in that in those axes, right? So Lauren, where would you put the least desirable future and why? And thank you for volunteering, by the way, right? You may have different views, right? I mean, you're all going to get a chance to do this independently. So Lauren's just going to walk us through her thoughts and her logic.
Well, I mean, I think down here is probably the least desirable.
In that, which you're in the very lower left?
Yep.
Okay. And why there?
I think that sees us isolated from the region.
Yeah.
And dealing more trying to deal alone on issues that are actually truly regional issues.
Okay.
So if we isolate, we're probably not going to be successful trying to do that. And I think that sort of it's kind of like the stick your head in the sand approach of like, we're going to ignore the outlying region, and we're going to ignore whatever controls we might be able to have, and just let the market just go with the flow, and just the market will handle it. We're going to ignore it, and it'll take care of itself.
And really what happens is you end up being at the effect of a lot of trends, right? You just become the recipient of those, right? Okay, so that's your thoughts, right? Where would you put the expected future? But the expected future being, where do you think we're going to end up if we keep heading the way we're currently heading?
I think we're somewhere like more around here, I would say.
Okay, you have to pick
I have to pick one square. I'm gonna pick that square.
Okay, so why did you pick that one?
I think that we trend proactive.
Okay.
And I think there is a give and take with that.
Okay.
So there's always sort of a tension between keep things the same and be proactive and change them.
Okay.
So it kind of pulls in both directions.
Okay.
And I think that we do trend a little bit more toward being more insulated, and I think there are a lot of factors with that are, you know, what's the tendency, and then what's our actual influence, and what is the appetite for our neighbors to work regionally. So that all kind of feeds into that.
And, you know, so what Lauren just demonstrated is processing a lot of stuff, right? Mm-hmm. And was able to kind of go, okay, I think there, because we're leaning this way a little bit, we've got this tenant, you know, like it's a really, like a very clear and nuanced way to get to it, right?
I thought it was good, yeah.
All right, but you may have your own. You've asked you to do your thoughts on this, right? So, Lauren,
this is a safe space, right?
You're being recorded.
Oh, God, okay.
So, where would you put?
It's what it is.
Where would you put the preferred future, and why?
Well, I think the preferred is going to be more regional and more proactive.
So which box?
Way in the corner, I think.
You're going right in the upper.
Yeah,
right.
I'm going for it.
Okay.
Yeah.
All right. Good. And so that's also a chance for. So she said, right, I'm going to go for it, right? That's a willingness to take maximum change, higher risk, and so on, right? So you know you can moderate that because you can kind of scale back on different directions. Why did you pick that?
Well, I think the opposite of the other. It's I think truly our biggest issues, biggest challenges, biggest opportunities are regional. So there's more opportunity for the best benefit for the most people if we work together as a region.
Yeah.
And instead of just ignoring, you know, or kind of just kind of laissez-faire, just letting it go, trying to get ahead of things instead of just react to things. Okay.
And so we're going to get you to all do this, right? But you can see straight away, right? So you said expected here, least desired here. So we don't want that, right? That's the antithesis of what we want. Expected's here, but your preferred is here, right? And what that tells us, right, for you, right? If we were to design a strategy to reflect what you wanted, we now know we need to move on both these axes, right? And we also got an indication of velocity in that as well, because you're going for it, right? You're gung-ho, right? So there's a trajectory and a velocity component. Now, we'll see what happens when we stack it up with you guys, right? And obviously we're going to then test this with the community, right? So really interesting, right? So can we hand out the sheets to everybody? So you're all going to get a sheet to do this, right? You don't have to put your name on it, but we want to collect the data, right? So each person, so remember for how you do it on your sheet is you put L for the least desired, E for expected, and P for preferred, and you put it in the box, right, that correlates to your choice. From strategy, we start to think about, okay, what do we have to do to move from here to here? What are the building blocks for that, right? So it sort of lays down what the trajectory is, and even to a degree the sense of urgency. But we do need to test this with the community. So in November we're coming back and we're doing a whole series of workshops, with Rotary and community groups and neighbourhood groups. We want to get people, because we've got to make sure that this is reflective of where the community is going to land, right? So we want to just give a little bit more defensibility or certainty on that. Deb?
So it is an interesting, the concept we have expected future.
Yeah.
So is that like the realist versus the idealist?
Well, you could probably label something like that. I mean, I just talk about this being, where do you think we're heading towards, right?
Without any, where are we currently heading? What's
That's
the
right.
future?
Where's your current strategy, mindset, approach, priority setting? Where's that going to land you, right? And I think we talked about this. One of the big shifts here is from this more kind of internal orientation to a very, like you've almost all set up, this strong regional approach. That's going to require a very different approach at the level of government. I mean, because your commissioners, they're accountable and responsible to Traverse City, but you're saying our future success is going to require a different set of partnerships and collaborations. So it's going to require a different kind of thinking, and maybe there's whole different types of approaches, right? And there's got to overcome trust and those historic issues, right? Yeah. Oh, sorry, and then Tim, but you, sir.
I wanted to ask if anybody that put their dot in the upper left-hand corner, this quarter in the expected future, why do you think that that's an appropriate place to put it?
Yeah, we heard Lauren's kind of thought on that. Anybody else want to?
Well, I think this community is more proactive than the average.
Yeah.
Particularly with planning and design. But I had trouble seeing we're stuck in the local thinking about it that way.
Yeah.
Only thinking of the city of Traverse City, we're not, there's almost no, because now there's one no regional authority that's been developed, but we're not anywhere over here.
Okay, it's clear. Tim, please.
So I had one of the dots on the preferred future, the red and blue on the top line there.
Here, yeah.
One of mine, and why I didn't go all in on the regional, kind of was reflected in the group that talked about like a regional zoning thing for whatever, because that scares me a little bit, like what happens when the region gets to decide what our zoning is in Traverse City.
Yeah, the flip side of it, yeah.
Right, so that's why I'm not all in. I'm like, yeah, I want some regional, but what do we give up?
Yeah, yeah.
I think it's interesting that there's a cluster of 6 that are kind of like
right here.
Yeah, like
yeah.
We want the regional cooperation, we want the proactive design, but we're not quite sure that we're going to be able to shoot the moon.
Yeah, yeah. Well, and that can also be people's. This to me often when I say this is people just tempering risk a little, right? Sort of what you were saying, Tim. But this is tempering risk because if you go all in on something, then and it's unfamiliar to you, then there's a danger of, well, what if it doesn't quite work out the way? What's our fallback or what's our strategy? So we're just going to temper it. We want to move that way. We don't want to put all our cards on the table.
I was in the same box as Tim's, and the reason was I saw Traverse City taking the lead on the integration, rather than following what the region did, but taking the lead on a regional vision.
Yeah. I think what Tim said, though, to paraphrase you, is that that's a two-way street, right? and you're 15,000 in almost 100,000.
But we did talk in our group that we have some resources here that the rest of the region
Exactly.
would like.
You got some stakes, right?
We got to do this.
That's right.
Yeah. And so having something they want, and if you want it, like say access to the bayfront, then you can provide what. And so you play this quid pro quo game.
Yeah.
And you have to do it with trust and honesty, not Mayor Daley. But you can lead in a proactive manner.
Yeah. All right, good. Okay. Any other comments on this? This is a great discussion, right? So, please.
One of the things we spent quite a bit of time on in our group was the zoning issue. And, it's kind of interesting, the development out there by the county headquarters and the new beta. Those are relatively attractive garden apartments.
Yeah.
and we're getting a lot of square boxes downtown. And Susanna made the comment, you can have a zoning ordinance that bans right angles.
Yeah.
And Susanna said, well, Buzz in the architecture community is non-Euclidean geometry. So if you're going to build density and multi-use, it'd be nice if it was attractive.
Yeah.
You know, I'd rather live in Paris than Manhattan.
Yeah.
But that's a personal preference, but that's what's going to drive what gets built and what gets zoned. And the challenge, I think, is more out in the outlying areas, the townships.
Yeah.
Where they're more free market, you know, do whatever you want.
Yeah, it's a really good comment because the thing I've heard here is you don't want to be anywhere America. Is kind of what I heard, right? I mean, there's a recognition you do have something special. You do have some heritage and character here. You could also see that disappearing.
Exactly.
Right, and
We're afraid of that.
Yeah.
We're very,
Or I could. Oh, yep. Okay.
Just one more thought. I mean, I think people are leaping to the regional involves some sort of super governmental regional entity.
Yeah.
And there are lots of ways back to the regional link that don't involve that.
It's just collaboration.
Data, shared understanding. People have talked about incentives, and you can do that. I mean, I think that once you create sort of a powerful case, there's a way to sell it at the individual level without dictating.
Yeah.
So
Yeah.
I think there are multiple pathways back to regionally and collaboratively.
Yeah, Jeff, but I think that the thing that I think is the challenge that I see in that is that means really rethinking maybe our government structure in order to have the ability to affect those changes. So, sharing of data, then you don't just have an IT director that is just Traverse City, and you have to have liaisons maybe that are now that report into the city council for the other regions. Because you can't just say I'm going to be regional if you don't affect that communication and that sharing. And that requires infrastructure. I mean, that requires people. That requires, so I mean, it's.
Form follows function. If you don't form organizationally with those leads and supports, you're not going to get the cooperative coordination leading to collaborative innovation.
Great. So we're starting to try and work out the how, right? How we're going to move from here to there, and that's great, right? And I want you to think about that, right? But for this exercise, I do want to kind of just sort of draw it together, right? Because I think we've got to where we need to get, which is we've done the work to develop out these scenarios. You've had your say on where you think we now need to validate this with the community, give other people a chance to weigh in on this, right? I think you did the job of the deep thinking. It sets the table, but I'm going to invite you to start to think about, well, what are the strategy elements that we have to be thinking about? As this gentleman was just starting to probe, right? We might need to be thinking about this or so on. What are those building blocks going to be to get us from where we think we're going to where we want to go, right? We do want to wrap it up, but can we get a photo of everybody in front of the screen over there? And Adam, can you go back one slide to the scenario matrix?
But we paste.
Well, let me tell you that.
We're gonna document the guilty.
So if you need me to do anything,
just get them to tuck inwards. Oh, the chairs will be fine, but pull in. Everyone's pushed out.
All right, you guys are gonna have to right.
We're best friends now, right?
Get in. Yeah.
We might have to
What?
on a road change.
Yeah, no, okay.
We might.
let's get to the
We're not gonna have Jordan. Come on, Jordan. You come on, Jordan. Here, Jordan. You don't have to do. Come on, Team D. David, chair seems complicated.
Okay.
Sorry. All right. Ready? 1, 2.
Well, look like you're enjoying yourself.
Woo! We love it. Best friends. Thank you.
Good job. All right, thank you, everybody. All right, we're going to wrap it up there. Where's Liz? Do you want to say anything to finish?
Just look for some news coming out shortly on those community workshops. We're going to be launching a survey, I think, by the end of October.
Yeah.
And then the dates for the community workshops are going to be roughly November 11th through 14th. I'm already working with community partners to get talking to Rotary, the Community Foundation. We're going to set neighborhood meetings. They're going to be 1 hour. We might even be able to do 2 in a night, where we do like one from like 5 to 6, and then boom, 6:30 to 7:30. Everyone's welcome to attend these. Even if they're in your neighborhood and you can't go to that one, go to a different one. So we're going to try to hit the whole town. And then there won't be any action in this December. A lot of deliverables will begin to get posted in December for us to think about, and they'll be posted to the portal. And then we're going to hit the ground running again in January.
And where do we watch for communication?
The Bay Brief, Facebook. I mean, I'll be making announcements. Everyone's been signing in with their emails, so if you said you wanted updates, you're going to get an update. So yeah, like the week of the 11th through the 14th, those are those community events which keep popping up, and we're starting to organize those right now.
Hey, stay safe.
Thank you.
That's,
3, 10,